All right, we are live. Hello, everybody. Chuck Holton here, coming to you from my studio in Panama. It's good to see all of you today, although I can't see any of you. I just see you in the chat here. Do me a favor in the chat and put where you're watching from. We've got people from, Arizona, Belgium, Missouri, Ohio, Florida, California, from the UK, all over the place, even Seattle. Wow. That's pretty awesome. We're going to be talking about a couple of things today. You know, there's been a major show of force by the United States in the Caribbean over the last month or so, aimed at Venezuela, and we may see some movement on that very soon. It looks like the Pentagon struck another drug boat last night. That's the first one since the sort of double tap that has caused all sorts of consternation with Democrats and even some Republicans. But that show of force, we've got 15,000 troops. We've got about 13 or 14 ships and a submarine in the region. That's pretty major. That's the largest buildup of forces that the United States has done in any one place since the beginning of the Gulf War, or I guess global war on terror, you'd say. But China, on the other hand, is quietly building up forces in the South China Sea and in the Pacific to the tune of more than 100 ships. And listen, when a country like China pushes more than 100 naval vessels across East Asia without any warning, you don't need a strategist to tell you the global landscape is getting pretty unstable. So, markets react to that fear long before the politicians do. And history is clear about what happens to currencies when superpowers start flexing like that, especially major superpowers like China. You know, President Trump met with Chinese President Xi on October 30th. And I'm going to show you a video from that meeting that is actually kind of sad to me, if I can get to it. Got a lot of stuff to cover today. But you know what? All of that uncertainty is why I work with Preserve Gold. They specialize in physical gold and silver, the kind you can actually hold, not some digital nonsense that evaporates the minute a supply chain or hiccups or a conflict erupts. Physical metals have outlasted empires, currencies, market crashes, and every geopolitical gamble from the last several thousand years. So when nations start saber rattling, investors quietly are moving into assets that don't care who controls the shipping lanes. If you're watching China's maritime buildup and thinking the world feels a little less predictable, you're not imagining anything. Preserve Gold can help you protect your savings with real tangible metals delivered securely to you or put in IRS-approved storage. So you can actually take your 401k or IRA and take a portion of that, put it into physical gold and silver, and you would have done better than the S&P 500 over the last 5 years. So in a time where governments are testing each other's boundaries and the markets feel like a pressure cooker, gold and silver are the one form of stability that isn't dictated by, politicians or central banks. So call Preserve Gold or visit their website. Go to send the word Chuck to 50505, just like you're sending a text message on your phone. Just instead of a contact, just put in 50505 and put the word Chuck and send it. And they will send you a free wealth protection guide and an investor kit. You can talk to them on the phone and they will help you safeguard what you've earned before the next headline proves why you should have. So thank you to Preserve Gold for sponsoring our show. Now, let's move on. China is deploying more than 100 naval and Coast Guard vessels across East Asian waters, and that forms the largest maritime show of force recorded to date. I mean, 100 ships is massive, and we're going to talk a little later about China's shadow fleet. They're what they call fishermen militia that is far larger even than their navy, and actually it could form a part of their navy at some point. So Reuters, this is all coming from a Reuters article, and I've got an image of it here I can show you. Let's see here. There it is. We'll pull that up. So this Reuters article talks about China's massing military across the region in a show of maritime force. And it kind of makes you wonder how connected this is to the show of force that's happening in the Caribbean Sea. It's like China saying, well, yeah, you know, you guys want to start flexing your muscles over there in the Caribbean, potentially causing problems for China if we take out Maduro. Then China's like, oh, well, maybe we'll just build up forces over here. But there's probably more to it than that. Intelligence reviewed by Reuters shows the ship concentrations in the southern Yellow Sea, through the East China Sea and the South China Sea, and extends deep into the Pacific. This deployment doesn't have any official announcement, no major PLA exercises, and that adds obviously to the regional unease, making that makes the scale look deliberate and not just routine. Now, this is the time of the year when the Chinese forces like to, I had that in there twice, where the Chinese forces like to flex their muscles and go out and do military training at sea. So it could just be military training exercises. The thing is, normally they announce them ahead of time. And this is something that's common across the globe with large militaries. If you're going to do a military training exercise, it's usually a good idea to alert your neighbors and even your adversaries to that fact, because if you don't, they could take it as a buildup for war, and it could, really escalate the tensions. So normally they put out the word, hey, we're going to have a military exercise at sea over here, so nobody get worried. That's actually what Vladimir Putin did in February 2022 before he invaded Ukraine. He said, no, this is just military exercises. It's nothing special, just routine military exercises. And then actually his troops didn't even know that it wasn't military exercises. His troops actually thought they were out there for training until they were told to cross that fence and go into Ukraine. And they were like, wait, what? So it kind of kept it a secret even from his own people. Now, Japan and China are already in a diplomatic breakdown after Japan's prime minister stated that a Chinese attack on Taiwan could trigger a Japanese military response. That could be a big deal. Now, I did a story about that when I went to Japan in 2023, because Japan was already expecting to have to go to war with China. And they at that time said they expected it to happen in 2027 or early 2028. That is still the thought. But if that is the prevailing knowledge, then it wouldn't surprise me if China decided to move up the timeline if they felt like there was a window of time that they could do that and actually strike harder or surprise their enemies before they were ready. But like I say, Japan has been getting ready for some time. Check out this. It's a fairly long piece, but it's worth watching because everything in it is still 100% relevant to what we're talking about. So take a listen.
Japanese and American troops are preparing for possible military action. These joint exercises, which took place in June, are the largest held on Japanese soil since World War II. Increasing threats from China have the entire Pacific Rim worried the Red Army could soon move on Taiwan, less than 140 miles from Japan's shores. In the same area, Chinese Coast Guard ships have been encroaching on Japanese waters almost weekly. As a counter, U.S., Japanese, and Philippine Coast Guard ships also held maneuvers in June. Ishigaki Island, a popular Japanese tourist destination, could soon become a battleground.
This year will be the biggest year for tourists here on Ishigaki Island that they've seen since COVID. And That's a really good thing for the economy of the island, but what the people that live here are most worried about is an influx of another kind of people caused by an attack on Taiwan.
We are concerned about an influx of refugees in the event of an attack, because we are the closest island to Taiwan. This is an example of China trying to change the status quo by force.
To counter the threat, more soldiers are being moved to bases in the south of Japan.
This new military base just opened here on Ishigaki Island. It's one of the closest ones to the Chinese coast and to Taiwan. It's one of 4 bases that's been built recently to counter the threat from China. This one will be home to more than 500 troops. Most of the people on this island are very pro-military and very happy to have this here, but some people are not, and it's not so much the base itself, it's the kind of troops that they plan to station here.
Locals have been staging protests here because they fear the presence of Japanese artillery batteries would only make the island a target.
Some say it will increase tensions, but I believe it is necessary to strengthen our defenses.
This former Japanese general agrees.
If
Taiwan is annexed, the Chinese army will be stationed there, and we could lose control of the sea lanes that provide 60% of Japan's energy and 40% of its food. So there is already an emergency in Taiwan, and an emergency in Taiwan is an emergency in Japan.
But that doesn't mean Japan is looking for a fight.
The rise of China is causing alarm in democratic governments around the world. And so Japan is trying to show that it's part of the liberal democratic club and that it's doing its share to advance liberal democracy around the world. China is going to lose. China is a godless, militantly atheist country that took over first by massacring its own people. Genocide is the communist way of life, and it's particularly the Chinese communist way of life. It's just how they operate. I'm reading now the former Prime Minister Abe Shinzo's, he was assassinated last year. I'm reading his memoirs that were released posthumously, and he makes that point in his memoirs that Japan needs to do more to shoulder the burden of liberal democracy, especially vis-a-vis China and places like North Korea and Russia. So that's the political dynamic. Under that, I see and I feel the reawakening of the Japanese spirit that has been dormant and that was almost destroyed in the post-war. That has nothing to do with liberal democracy, has nothing to do with Russia or China or North Korea. That's the almost organic sense of being alive in Japan and having a heart that has an ability to feel beauty in the world and to communicate with other spirits in the world. And that's what's coming back.
So Japan, it seemed to be building up more troops or military. But if you were to ask any of those people visiting Yasukuni Shrine and came here to pray for the warriors, their minds, they don't think about war. Like if you ask, what do you think about war? Almost all of the people would say, no way. So it's not like, oh, we wanted to fight. No, we want peace. So we want to pay respect and peace. So we come here to wanting for peace.
No matter how likely there is to be a war, our job is to stop it. To ensure China's president doesn't miscalculate like Putin did. The point is that if China invades Taiwan, the United States and Japan will have the ability to counter that together.
Chuck Holton, CBN News,
So
Tokyo.
that was the piece that I made for CBN when I came back from my last trip to Japan. Beijing has reacted pretty sharply to the comments that were made by Tokyo and called them provocative and hostile, fueled their perception that Asia's 2 largest powers are edging toward confrontation. But it's not just Japan and China. It's China and China and South Korea, China and the Philippines, China and Vietnam. It's China is pretty much against everybody. China is in it for China, and that's all. Now, when it comes to taking over Taiwan, regional security officials believe that the massed Chinese fleet serves multiple purposes. First of all, they're intimidating Taiwan, signaling to Japan, just flexing their muscles, probing the United States and allied response patterns, right? I mean, they want to see how they respond to this, and then rehearsing for a blockade or some kind of encirclement scenario or something like that. The absence of public statements about this, this 100-ship armada that's offshore there, just suggests that this is more like gray zone pressure. It's not declared drills. They're just, again, flexing their muscles. It's more of a show of force. The distribution of the ships mirrors past Chinese patterns that are associated with things, I guess you'd call it like coercion, including Coast Guard vessels that accompany naval groups to kind of blur the line between civilian and military actions. This is something we've seen all across that region by China as they've intentionally encroached on the shorelines of their adversaries in there, not just Taiwan and Japan, but as I said, the Philippines and South Korea as well. As a matter of fact, I have here a video of a South Korean Coast Guard vessel boarding a Chinese fishing boat that's illegally in their waters.
조업단 중 그물을 끊고 도주하던 중국어선 두 척을
looks pretty chaotic.
1km를 추격한 끝에 붙잡았습니다. 중국어선들은 우리 배타적 경제
So
수역에서 허가를 받지 않고
they took over this fishing boat that was fishing illegally off of South Korea.
해경은 어선 선장과 선원 등 8명을
So there have been several incidents like that, not just from South Korea, but other countries as well. Peru has had a big problem. We're going to talk more about that in just a second. Before we get to that, though, don't forget you can get one of these Hot Zone Press Monkey t-shirts from chuckholton.com. It should be pinned to the top of the site there. If you go to chuckholton.com, you'll see the link for where you can get t-shirts and mugs and different things, which you should be able to get in time for Christmas. So don't miss that if you want some swag from the Hot Zone. So Japan, Taiwan, and several Southeast Asian governments are increasingly monitoring each other, and they're raising their readiness levels because analysts are warning that a miscalculation in those waters, because they're very crowded, could really trigger a rapid escalation and outright war. So this is already a problem. It's been a problem for years, but it's hotter now than it was before, and it's not likely, but possible that China might try to pull something on Taiwan sooner than everybody thinks, just because what they may be waiting for is watching to see if the United States gets embroiled in a war in Venezuela that could dilute our attention, take our attention away from China. And then China says, this is our window. This is what the time to go. And they send in their forces. It is a foregone conclusion, without a doubt, that Taiwan and their allies, which is, the Philippines, the United States, China, South Korea, are getting more and more prepared to counter China as time goes on. Every day that passes, it's going to cost China more to take Taiwan if they really want to do so. But China has been ramping up their production of naval vessels. They can produce so many more naval vessels than we can. Something like 40 or 50 ships a year that they can build, where the United States has a hard time cranking out one or two. And a lot of that just comes down to regulations, the safety regulations and all that we have in the United States. They don't labor under any kind of safety regulations in China at all. And on top of that, it's as I was talking about, the blurring of the lines between the Chinese Navy and civilian vessels. This is something that China is doing around the world. There's a huge fleet of fishing boats that belong to China. China actually has about 40% of all of the fishing boats on planet Earth. One country, 40% of all the fishing boats on planet Earth. And they don't just stick around China. As a matter of fact, they can't, because of course, Chinese love seafood. There's a massive demand for seafood in China. And so they cannot just fish out of their own waters, because they have polluted and overfished their own waters to the point where there's almost no fish left in what you would call the China economic zone offshore, 200 miles offshore from China. So what they do is they send out thousands of ships all around the world, and they overfish everybody else's economic zones, exclusive economic zones, like Peru. So this shadow fleet, and I'll tell you in a minute why I call it a shadow fleet. Here's a graphic. I got to turn the audio off of this. But this show, the red dots are Chinese fishing vessels, and this is offshore of Peru. And it says about 20% of all the fish caught worldwide come from the rich ecosystem in the Humboldt Current off of the coast of Peru. And you see there, those Chinese fishing vessels are coming and going. They're just thousands of them. But you know what? They're not staying outside that exclusive economic zone. What they do is they congregate outside, then they turn off their transponders so they're untraceable, and they go inside Peruvian waters, and they steal essentially fish from the Peruvian waters, take them offshore. Now I want to back this up a minute, because if you see over here, you see these ships, they make a beeline out here to the middle of the ocean, and they congregate out there for a little bit. Well, what's going on there? What's happening is they are transferring the fish that they've caught in Peruvian waters to refrigerated reefer ships out in the middle of the ocean. They do that not for efficiency's sake, but because it helps to muddy the water, so to speak, and make it harder to track where fish comes from. So this fish doesn't just end up in China, although most of it does. This fish actually ends up in the United States as well, and in Canada and in Europe. So especially if you're eating calamari, which is squid. I don't know if everybody knew that. The marketers decided many years ago that calling it squid was kind of icky. So they came up with the term calamari to trick people into eating squid in the United States. And it worked. We now eat more than 100 tons of squid every year in the United States in the form of calamari. And a lot of that calamari comes from this area right off the shore of Peru, because it's one of the areas where they are most plentiful. The thing is, China doesn't follow any rules. China is a lawless country. As you heard in my piece there, that professor I was interviewing at the Yakasuki Shrine, or whatever you call that, was saying that China is a godless country. I've always said that the motto in China should be, if you're not cheating, you're not trying. If you get caught, you're not trying hard enough. And because you see so much outright fraud, rule breaking, espionage, corporate and otherwise, all across the world coming from China, that it is part and parcel of who they are as a nation. China cheats. That's all there is to it. China cheats in every arena, every possible way. China is working overtime to improve its standing, to become a global hegemon by means of corporate espionage, industrial espionage, military espionage, and yes, even cultural espionage in the United States. What do I mean by cultural espionage? Well, they're funding these institutes called the Confucius Institutes at universities all across the United States. And I have a video here of this, if I can find it. There it is, with Gordon Chang. Now, Gordon Chang has been on my show before, and he was on Fox talking about the 660,000 Chinese students that Trump wanted to let into the country on educational visas. And take a listen to what he had to say.
It seems that you and I have been talking about this kind of story, I don't know, 20 years? This has been going on for years, yet all we hear is about how great it is to have Chinese students in the United States of America. No offense, I'm sure they're great Chinese students, but this is a threat that, frankly, we don't need and we shouldn't be tolerating.
Certainly. And we know that about 13% or so of those Chinese students engage in espionage. When you consider that in 2024, there were 277,000 Chinese nationals in our school, 13% is a big number. And it's especially a big number if you double that, as President Trump had talked about. But the other thing, of course, is that we have seen at the University of Michigan now this year, 2 incidents of Chinese trying to bring in genetically modified pathogens. Those were dangerous to our food supply. This is a biological weapons attack. These were weapons of mass destruction. This was an attack on the United States. And unfortunately, the Chinese nationals are only going to get light sentences. And matter of fact, one of them from June was actually removed from the U.S. after she pled guilty. We should be sending these people to Guantanamo because these are enemy combatants.
So Gordon's talking there about the espionage going both directions. So not only are Chinese students and other Chinese people, any Chinese person anywhere is subject to being sort of tagged by the government of China and saying, you're a spy now, you need to give us go get what we want or do what we want. So the Chinese students in the United States were caught not only stealing secrets from universities, university labs and research facilities, things like that, but also bringing in biological agents that could literally wipe out the food supply in the United States. It's not just Chinese students doing it, it's Chinese businessmen, and there have been lots of incidents where they were caught bringing things in or stealing things and trying to take them out. As a matter of fact, I was told that they actually try to steal secrets from Gulfstream, the jet company, when they sent some businessmen over to Gulfstream pretending that they wanted to buy a jet and they wanted to look at the process. So they wanted to look at the factory where they build the jets and everything. And as these guys were leaving, it was found that they had sticky tape on the bottom of their shoes that was collecting the filings of alloy that they use in the airplanes to, I guess, study them, reverse engineer them, and allow China to get a leg up in that industry. I remember a story about China buying from Siemens some large windmills and getting the software that Siemens has. It's proprietary software for those windmills. And then they just reverse engineered the windmills, hacked the software and reverse engineered the software, and then stopped buying from Siemens and started producing the exact same windmill, the exact same software on their own because they had stolen all that information. China cheats. I cannot say it often enough. And not only do they cheat, but they don't treat their own people very well either. China is known for very serious humanitarian rights abuses, not just against people like the Uyghurs, but just against everybody in China. And there are something like 8 million people that are employed on the 57,000 fishing vessels that China has all around the world. At least 6,500 of those travel outside of China's economic zone to other places. So these, far fishing expeditions. And these boats, by the way, are wholly owned by, I mean, the whole industry in China is owned by the CCP. It's owned by the government. These are not private fishing boats. They subsidize the fuel and everything like that to make it more profitable for them to fish in places where it's already, not profitable for capitalistic societies to fish there. But then what they're doing is they're fishing these things down to the point of extinction. And they're doing it not with long lines and nets. Very often what they're doing is fishing with cyanide. They throw cyanide in the water. It kills everything where in the area, everything. Turtles, birds, everything. Large mammal, fish, whatever, kills everything. And they just scoop everything up and take it back to China. Killed it with cyanide. It destroys the reefs and basically turns, what was a thriving, vibrant ecosystem into an underwater parking lot. So again, China cheats. They're not going to do it the right way. They're not going to do it in a way that's sustainable. They don't care about sustainability one bit, not at all. And they don't have any problem polluting the waters off of the Philippines. I just saw a video on X today of the Filipinos grabbing a guy on a fishing boat who was throwing cyanide into the water just off the coast of the Philippines. Again, it's a lazy man's way, a lazy, immoral man's way of fishing because it kills everything. China is known for fishing in places that have been set as off limits so that populations of fish there can rebound because they've been overfished. And one of the areas where that happens is off the coast of Peru there. They will fish the areas where the squid are breeding. So those are supposed to be off limits because, again, you want them to breed so you'll have more fish next year. China doesn't care. They just go in and grab everything and kill all the, sort of seed corn fish that were like the breeding stock. Okay. Now they also do this on these 57,000 ships that go worldwide by employing forced labor. And there are stories that have been put out by investigative journalists on the internet about this that will it's horrific. It's modern day slavery is what it is. Take a look at this report from, I think it's India Today.
Americans know little about how their seafood is sourced. Much of it comes from a vast fleet of Chinese ships, but on board, human rights abuses are rampant. Fueled by the world's growing and insatiable appetite for seafood, China has dramatically expanded its reach across the high seas.
So I'm going to turn the audio off on that because it's got music in it. But it points out that not only, as I said, is that fish going to China, it's going to the United States. And there's not really any way for you to know where the source, where the provenance of the fish that you're eating came from. Panama has a law now that they have to label the fish that they sell with what country it came from. The problem with that is, again, the way China does this with these offshore, let's see if I get that back. These ship-to-ship transfers that they do offshore here, right there. You see that ship-to-ship transfer off on the left side of the screen. They can spoof where the fish has come from. So again, China always cheats. Always. You cannot trust China to do anything the right way. They always, always, always cheat. Now, I'll go put that back on the stage. Oh, no, I already showed you that. That was a wrong one. So China is using these men that work on these ships as forced labor. the human rights, they're torturing people, throwing them overboard, just killing them. All sorts of terrible things are happening to the people that work on board. Many of them are told they're not allowed to leave. They have their papers confiscated. And again, that is just human trafficking in one of its worst forms. So it's a huge, huge problem, absolutely massive problem. And it goes far beyond the blockade or whatever training drills or whatever that China is doing offshore right now. This shadow fleet, we call it gray zone warfare, is yet another way that China is stealing from the world and trying to take down the United States while they become a global hegemon. There's no two ways about that. That is, there's so much proof out there. It's insane. Now, one other thing that I wanted to point out is there's an Economist article that talked about how people in China are assisting the Mexican drug cartels with money laundering. So there are export controls in China that don't allow you to export more than, I think, $50,000 in currency. And so if you're a rich person in China and you want to buy an apartment in New York, for example, you've got to be able to get that money to the United States, but China will only let you send out $50,000. So that's not enough. So what these wealthy people in China are doing is they contact the Mexican drug cartels through a shadow broker that's like an underground bank in China. And they transfer, let's say that the flat in New York is going to cost them $1 million. So they transfer the $1 million to this underground banker in China. The underground banker then contacts the drug cartel in Mexico and says, what do you guys need? And the drug cartel says, well, we need $1 million worth of precursor chemicals so that we can make more fentanyl to send in the United States. So the shadow broker says, okay, no problem. And he buys the precursor chemicals, ships them to Mexico. The cartel takes delivery of the $1 million worth of precursor chemicals. And then the cartel gives the Chinese family that started this whole thing the money in cash. And that U.S. cash is now clean U.S. cash, and it's laundered. And then they can use it to buy their apartment or land next to an air base or a military facility. You see where I'm going with that, right? We know that the Chinese have been buying up lots of land around U.S. military bases, and that is how they are paying for things like that. It is through this complicated money laundering process that leaves no paper trail and makes it almost impossible to figure out where exactly the money came from for these things. There's also a tremendous number of illegal marijuana grows in the United States, and I've done some reporting on that and gone out to a couple of these. The people that when they raid these illegal marijuana grows, California, Washington, Oregon, places like that, they find very often that they are staffed and run by illegal Chinese immigrants who are basically slaves. They've had their paperwork taken away. They're kept out on the farm. If they get too belligerent or too demanding, their masters just murder them and dump them in a ditch and fill it in a shallow grave. They have found some like that out there. So again, China always cheats. Always, always, always. And they could care nothing about human life. They care nothing about anything like that. Now, with that in mind, all of the things that I've just shown you, China building up its military forces, threatening its neighbors, threatening global stability, threatening the global supply chain, because Taiwan produces, computer chips that we all need. And not only that, but working to assist Russia in their war against Ukraine, by sending them lots of computer hardware and cameras and other elements that they need to build their drones that they're using to kill Ukrainians every day. The things that they're doing with the Uyghurs and Christians. As a matter of fact, I have I think I have, let's see if it went away. Oh, I think it might have gone away. Let me go find it again real quick. I have a video of Ted Cruz talking about China's crackdown on Christians that's happened recently, and it's pretty sickening. Take a listen.
Senator from Texas.
Madam President, I rise today to speak about a grave matter and a clear violation of religious freedom, human dignity, and the rule of law. In China, Christians are fighting daily for their religious freedom against the Chinese Communist Party. And on October 10th, 2025, the Chinese Communist Party launched the largest coordinated nationwide crackdown in more than 4 decades against a Christian urban house church in China. In that sweep, 23 pastors and church members of the Zion Church, one of China's largest underground congregations, were arrested and wrongfully detained, including Pastor Ezra Jin. Pastor Jin and the members of the Zion Church were not engaged in violence. They were worshiping. They were serving God. And for that action, they are being treated as enemies of the communist state.
So obviously, China does not have a good track record with how they treat Christians or other religious minorities. They've taken over churches and mosques and turned them into dance halls and saloons and things like that. And communism is just not compatible with Christianity at all. So there's that. And so all of that, you know, plus them fishing out all the seas and stealing people's fish from within their territorial waters and all of that, keep that in mind as we watch this clip from President Trump meeting with President Xi on October 30th.
Very much. It's a great honor to be with a friend of mine, really for a long time now, if you think about it. The very, very distinguished and respected President of China.
Barf.
And we will be having some discussions. I think we've already agreed to a lot of things, and we'll agree to some more right now. But President Xi is a great leader of a great country, and I think we're going to have a fantastic relationship for a long period of time. And it's an honor to have you with us. Thank you very much.
So I don't know how that makes you feel. I mean, I understand that President Trump's trying to be diplomatic here, and you don't walk into a meeting with a foreign leader and immediately start attacking him. Oh, wait, unless it's the president of Ukraine and you brought him to the White House, then it's okay. I guess you can beat up on him there. But this effusive pandering to Xi, he's a great man, a great leader of a great country, and have absolutely nothing to say about any of the human rights abuses, any of the espionage that's taken place against the United States, the fentanyl coming into the United States. Now, what makes me feel like President Trump doesn't actually believe that Xi is a great leader and a great man is because President Trump has spoken pretty harshly about the Chinese in terms of the fentanyl that's coming into the United States. But he's always looking to make a deal. You know, President Trump is very transactional. And with that in mind, he's sitting down with President Xi trying to see what he can extract from Xi. But it's just gross to watch him flatter a guy like that. It's just pretty gross. Doesn't make me happy. Okay, well, let's get to our questions here. We've got 45 minutes in, so it looks like we got a bunch of questions. Culling Gun says China just started BRICS today. No, I'm not sure what you mean by that. BRICS actually was a term that was coined in 2001. it stands for Brazil, Russia, India, China. And it's it actually started as a organization in 2006. So it's been around for a long time, and they have BRICS meetings from time to time. Basically, this is a group of countries that is looking to unseat the United States as the global hegemon. That's what BRICS is all about. So it's not obviously not something we should support. Okay. Hey, thank you for the super sticker, Corey. I appreciate that. That's very kind. Folks, a lot of the funds that you guys send are going to help people all around the globe. As I mentioned, we did a fundraiser on Tuesday for the Colombian women that we, single moms that we are discipling and helping to support down in Colombia. And also, it looks like we're about to expand some of that into Panama. We just last month did a, last month or month before, we helped support a prison outreach to the women's prison that's right down the hill here from us. And we'd like to do more of that. We also have run into some Venezuelan migrants that are here in Panama who need help getting a business started. And we want to give them kind of a micro loan to get their business off the ground. So I appreciate all of you who donate like that, because it does make a difference. Even, $5-10 makes a big difference when you got a bunch of people getting together. So you guys are so generous. So you prove the fact that American Christian conservatives are the most generous people group on planet Earth by a large order of magnitude. And that's been proven by studies. Okay, next question is, Nate, where are we going? Seems like wars are erupting everywhere, or the possibility of one. Should I be worried? Well, I don't know that you should be worried unless you live in one of those places where wars might pop off. I mean, you should be prepared. That's one of the reasons why I talk about my book, Death of Civilization. I talk about my son's YouTube channel, Third Monkey Ready. My son, now that's my son Mason, my oldest son, not Nathan, the one who's producing the YouTube here. But Mason's channel is almost at 1,000 subscribers now, and thank you very much to all of you who subscribe to his channel. Okay, next question. What will happen to computer chips if China attacks? Well, it's the companies that make the computer chips, which are being used for AI and all that sort of thing, are far more advanced than what China has right now. China wants those fabricators. The thing is, those fabricators don't want to be Chinese. And so they have kill switches on their machines that if China attacks, they can push a button and those things will become gigantic paperweights. They won't be worth anything. And they've been moving some of their operations outside of Taiwan and into the United States. So, for example, they're starting big chip fabs in Arizona and places like that. And that takes that off the table for China. You wonder if they were to just move all of the fabricating out of Taiwan, if China would still want Taiwan, because really I think what they want is the fabricating. All right. Is Japan an ally or on Taiwan? Yes, they are. Japan's an ally. Couldn't sanctions or some other methods be used to curb China's aggressive moves? Yes. And President Trump has threatened sanctions, and he usually does not follow up on those sanctions. The sanctions he put on Russia, he's already taking some of them off because he, somebody called and stroked his ego from Moscow, and he decided that these sanctions were working far too well and were assisting Ukraine in defending its country, so he got rid of them. Is there a black market for fish? Well, in a way, yes. Mike, the black market it's not a black market per se. There are black market on-ramps to the legitimate market for fish. And that's one of the reasons, like I said, why they take the fish that they catch illegally, rather than those ghost ships going and taking them to port, they take them out and they consolidate a whole bunch of legal and illegal fish onto one boat, and then that boat goes into port, acting like all of it was legally caught at sea. So it's kind of like blood diamonds work. If you understand how blood diamonds work, or blood gold, where you have mom and pop gold miners in Colombia and places like that, the cartels go around and collect up that gold. Then cartels sell that gold and make money. Actually, cartels make more money from illicit gold sales than they do from cocaine in Colombia. And that gold gets sort of, shunted into the legitimate gold market. And it's real hard to tell once it gets melted together with a bunch of other stuff, what's what. And there are ongoing efforts to try to slow that down. Okay. Next question. Why can't we just have peace? Well, why can't frogs have pockets? Why do people ask stupid questions? I mean, you're not going to have peace because people are sinful, fallen beings. And until there are no people left, we will not have peace. So next question. How is everything going in South Korea? Are they falling apart from within? South Korea's got some major issues economically and demographically and politically, but as a nation, they're doing okay. Their economy is strong, much, much stronger than most economies in the region. The problem is they're just running out of workers, because as people get too old to work, they're having almost no children in South Korea, almost none. And that does not bode well for South Korea in the next generation or two. Okay, next question. Trump agreed to allow thousands of Chinese students to study here with his drow with Xi. What was Trump thinking? They're spies, not students. Totally agree. That's my question as well. And Trump is probably thinking that we're going to get some money out of this, that these guys are going to come and benefit the economy somehow, or in exchange for allowing these students into the United States, China will do business with the United States in new ways or whatever, and make the U.S. more money. President Trump, for him, it's kind of all about the money. All right, next question. Is there no international waterway laws and enforcement? Can they be sunk for violating laws? If they enter a country's exclusive economic zone, that's 200 miles offshore, that country can treat it like an incursion or an act of war. And there have been a couple of cases recently where Chinese fishing vessels have been sunk because they entered the EEZ of a country illegally. I don't remember exactly what country, if it was Ecuador or the Philippines or South Korea. I don't remember. But these countries that are being aggressed upon by China are getting more aggressive back in their enforcement of those rules. But on the high seas, there's not much in the way of enforcement of any kind of law. It's a pretty lawless area once you get to the high seas. Next question. On a typical day, how much time do you spend researching a topic? How do you select what topic you're going to discuss in your live? I get up about 6:30 in the morning, and we do the live about 11. So that's the whole time is spent working on today's live. Then after I work out and have dinner and everything, I come back. I usually do some more reading at night until I go to bed to try to get a head start on what I'm going to talk about tomorrow. So this has become essentially my full-time job now. And I appreciate all of you who are members and have gone to chuckholton.com and supported me in that, because having your support on chuckholton.com is the foundation, the bedrock of my paycheck, because YouTube, they, demonetize stuff all the time. And so I can't trust the income from YouTube to actually pay my bills with. So it's all of you go over to chuckholton.com and have become supporters over there. It's $9 a month. Right now there's a sale on for $5 a month where you can become a supporter. You get access to lots of extra stuff, lots of early access to videos, and some other cool things like phone calls with me every month. So go check that out at chuckholton.com if you're interested. All right, next question. What's the answer for stopping China from stealing from the world? Putting massive sanctions on them and stop doing business with China. I personally have tried to divest myself from Chinese products in every way, shape, or form. I get contacted all the time by Chinese companies that want to sponsor my podcast to the tune of thousands of dollars per episode, and I turn them down. I'm not going to work for a Chinese company. And I am dead set on trying to at least not feed the beast with my own money. And if we all did that, China would crumble much faster than it already is. And that brings me to another point. China is not in a good way economically. They're not in a good way in a lot of ways. Their government is a lot like Iran's government. They're taking most of their government revenues and dumping them into things that are not profitable, like building warships and missiles and things like that, preparing for war. Again, they don't care a thing about their own people. The number of people who die from just poor quality goods in China, antifreeze in the toothpaste and stuff like that, is absolutely mind-boggling. But China doesn't care, and they're going to keep doing it. So, why is a Casio watch cheaper than 1 kilogram of meat? Probably because most of it, a lot of it is economies of scale, I guess. Putting on my stockbroker hat for a minute, economies of scale. There's so many of them made and sold throughout the world that they can do so very, very cheaply. It makes it much easier to get the price down. But if they're getting any pieces from China, then that would China's labor market, being what it is, would answer that question for you. All right. Zedri says, without direct wars between major nations, how is the global ranking of military lethality actually determined? They have a measurement that they call combat power. And so by aggregating the combat power of allied nations like NATO, okay, for example, or the CSTO Russia has, they can come up with a rough estimate of total combat power. And that's how they determine that. Now, you make a good point here, that things like that are not perfect measurements. And it's what they found, for example, with the war in Ukraine, is that their estimation, the experts' estimation of Russia's combat power, was sadly lacking, was really, really wrong. And they got it so wrong that all of the pundits were saying, oh, Russia will run over Ukraine in a matter of days. And it hasn't worked out that way for Russia, has it? All right. Next question. John says, do you like how we're changing our focus to our own hemisphere instead of everywhere else? Not necessarily. I think the United States is big enough and wealthy enough that we could have our focus all around the world. And we're not actually just focusing on our own hemisphere. The United States is building up forces in the South China Sea and all around China in anticipation of an actual real war that may be coming with China in 2027 or sooner. So we reopened naval base, very large naval base in the Philippines. We've built 3 or 4 more military bases in Japan. We're putting more troops and more combat power over there to try to dissuade China, for lack of a better term, from invading Taiwan. Okay, next. Is Peru pushing back on the abusive fishing off their coast? They are. pushing back. Are their hands tied with Belt and Road involvement? That's a good point, because China has been expanding. This is another way China's trying to prop up its economy. This Belt and Road initiative they have around the world, where they're going and creating infrastructure, and massive infrastructure, huge. They created a mega port in Peru, but they didn't hire Peruvians to do it. They brought Chinese people over to build it. And that's one way that the Chinese government is kind of trying to subsidize or stave off economic collapse, is making jobs by getting contracts in other places. They've done that here in Panama with a couple of bridges across the Panama Canal and a metro system, a train system, et cetera, that China has said, we will loan you the money to pay for all this stuff, but those loans come with strings attached. So Peru is probably hampered in some way, but they are trying to put us out. The thing is, they're just overwhelmed. Peru doesn't have enough ships in its Coast Guard to come anywhere close to the 6,500 ships that China is sending over there. And so these ships are going in all over that coastline from Ecuador down to Peru, and are just fishing it out, just completely decimating the populations of fish. Okay, next question. Are the farmers of South Africa still being murdered and slaughtered? Yes, they are. We should do more about that. I did something about that a couple months ago, but we should do more about that soon. Unrelated question. Can you do a piece on Plan Michoacan? Okay, I will consider it. Next, Rob Brooks says, is China a greater military threat to the USA than Russia? Absolutely they are. If the United States went to actual full-scale war with China, we'd likely see some of our ships sunk, we'd see aircraft shot down, and we'd lose thousands of troops. It would be a real war, not a fake war, not a proxy war. It'd be a real thing. So yes, they are. China is already dominating the world market. How can you stop millions of people every day from buying from Temu and all the other Chinese platforms? I mean, you could put tariffs on them that make their products too expensive. And that's one way that President Trump has tried to do it, Lone Wolf. So let's hope that he does more of that. Okay, next. I know you've talked about us being in World War III, but I don't think you've ever said how you think we're doing, and how do you tell who has won? That's a good question, because we're just at the beginning of it, and I don't think you can tell yet who has won or even who is winning. I just think you can tell that the war is on. In 1939, 1940, nobody quite knew who was going to come out on top in World War II, and nobody even knew who was close to winning that. So I don't think I can answer that question. All right, next question. Jesus Freak says, should Canada buy F-35s or Saab Griffins? The problem that some of our allies are having with buying F-35s is that the United States controls the parts flow and controls the software. And if the United States decides politically that we disagree with your government, we just shut off the flow of parts. So they're going to be looking at a calculation that includes, are we going to be able to continue to get parts and software upgrades for these weapons? And which country is more likely to remain an ally to us and not be so wishy-washy as the United States pulls apart into two very, very distinct political poles. And then for 4 years, you've got this group in charge, and they completely change everything from the last 4 years. And then you get this guy's back in charge, and they completely change everything from the last 4 years. And that kind of whiplash is not conducive to good business. Let's put it that way. Okay, Just Me Vicky says, how do we get a copy of your book? There's two ways. I have 12 books in print, and you can get copies of them, some of them as free downloads from chuckholton.com. So if you become a supporter over there, one of the benefits you get is the chance to download my books. And otherwise, you can buy them on Amazon.com. Just Google my name on Amazon and you'll find all my books there for sale. Okay, Tactical something says, do you think Trump will shut down TikTok in America? No, I don't. If he was going to do that, he would have done it by now. The pushback is just too great on that. And he just feels like he can't afford it. Should he? Absolutely. The right, just, moral, sane, safer thing to do is to shut it down, because TikTok is a spying platform that is committing social and cultural espionage on the United States, without a doubt. But it's just so popular, people love it. So it's hard to put a stop to. All right. Next, just subscribe. I didn't see your book info anywhere unless I missed it. Okay. I will put up a link to the book on chuckholton.com when this is over. Maybe Nathan can remind Rubina to do it. We'll just post that link real quick so that you can download the PDF of the book. All right. And One Tired Mama says, it's always amazes me how people create multiple accounts just to get put in timeout. Why don't you have anything better to do than spam a chat? Yeah, you often wonder, there must be people out there with a whole lot of time on their hands, because I sure wouldn't have time to do that. But I appreciate you, One Tired Mama, and all of our mods for writing herd on the craziness that is the YouTube chat. We couldn't do this job without you guys. And so thank you from the bottom of my heart. All right, folks, that's all I've got for today. Thank you very much for watching The Hot Zone. I appreciate all of you. Again, you can get these great t-shirts and mugs and stuff over at chuckholton.com. And I will post the link to the book there shortly. Okay. God bless you. We'll see you next time.